I want to start with a question, and it might sound a little strange at first, but just sit with it for a second. What if that feeling of loneliness you have, what if it isn't actually yours? I bet if you look around your family's house, somewhere, tucked away in a drawer or an old album, there's a certain kind of photograph. It's not the exact same photo for everyone, of course, but the scene, it's the same. A big gathering, a long table. People just all mixed together, no real order to it. You've got the older folks at one end, kids weaving between the chairs. There's probably even someone in there you can't quite place, but they were there. They were part of it. And back then, that scene probably felt totally normal, right? Just another Sunday, another birthday. But that picture, it captures something so specific. If you look at the faces, the ones not posing for the camera, they're caught mid-laugh, deep in a conversation. They're in this state of just relaxed presence. It's that feeling you get when you're around people and you don't have to try, you don't have to perform. Belonging wasn't something you had to choose or work for. It was just the water you swam in. Okay, so now think about your life today. And I don't mean just the last time you were with people, that's easy. I mean, when was the last time you were with people and felt exactly like that? Effortless. No performance. No thin, constant layer of distance that just seems to hang in the air now. You know what I mean? And hey, if you have to think about it for more than a couple of seconds, then you already know exactly what we're going to talk about.
Because here's the thing, that feeling, it's not just you, it's not just personal. We're now realizing this is happening on a massive global scale. And honestly, the stakes could not be higher.
And when I say massive scale, I'm not exaggerating. That's why in 2023, the US Surgeon General came out and officially declared loneliness a public health epidemic. That word epidemic, that's not hyperbole. This was a landmark report, and it framed loneliness not just as a sad feeling, but as a full-blown crisis. Why? Because the data was it was too overwhelming to ignore. Okay, get ready for this one, because it's a shocker. The physical health impact of chronic, long-term loneliness is the same as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Let that sink in. Not once, every single day. We are talking about major, serious physical damage. So this isn't just about feeling sad or left out. Look at these numbers. Being chronically lonely jacks up your risk of dementia by 41%. Heart disease, 29%. Stroke, 32%. This is a physical condition. It is actively, measurably harming our bodies. And here's where you see just how big this thing is. Recent surveys, they show that over half of all adults in developed countries say they feel lonely. Let me say that again, more than half. So you have to ask, right? If this is just a personal problem, a personal failure, then what we're looking at is the biggest coincidence in human history. Millions and millions of individual people, all having the same isolated experience, at the same time all over the world. How is that possible? How do you explain that? All right, so how did we get here? For the past, 20 years or so, we've had a standard lineup of explanations. The usual suspects, if you will. And you've probably heard all of them. You know the drill. We blame the phones, right? We blame social media. We point fingers at modern individualism or the economy that makes us all move for work instead of staying put. We talk about how our cities aren't built for community anymore and how all those old institutions, churches, unions, local clubs are fading away. And look, all of that stuff is true. It all plays a part, but it's not the whole story, not even close. And here's how we know it's not the whole story. It's a really fascinating example. If loneliness was just a side effect of, say, Western individualism, you'd think that collectivist cultures would be totally fine, right? But they're not. Take Japan, a very group-focused society. It has one of the highest rates of loneliness in the world. So high, in fact, that in 2021, they had to appoint a minister of loneliness. And get this, in the very same year, the United Kingdom, which is about as individualistic as it gets, did the exact same thing. Two opposite cultures, same problem, same solution. So something else is going on here. Something deeper that our usual explanations just aren't capturing. The story we've been telling ourselves is true, sure, but it's just one piece of the puzzle. It's not the whole picture, which means we have to start asking a totally different kind of question. And to do that, we're going to have to zoom out for a minute. We need to explore a concept that might seem, a little out there at first, but trust me, it is absolutely key to understanding what's really happening. So where do we start? Well, we have to go all the way back to a huge fundamental question.
Philosophers call it the hard problem of consciousness. It's not about how our brain processes information, it's about why it feels like something to be you. Why do you have this inner world, this subjective experience? And once you start asking that, it forces you to question this basic assumption we all have, that our experience is locked away inside our skulls, totally separate from everyone else. But what if that feeling of being separate isn't the whole truth? And look, this isn't just some philosophical navel-gazing. Edgar Mitchell, the sixth person to walk on the moon, a NASA astronaut with a PhD from MIT, so a serious scientist, he had this profound experience on his way back from the moon. He's looking at Earth from the window of his capsule, and he feels this, he called it an irresistible certainty that everything was connected. And he didn't mean it like a nice poem or a metaphor. He meant it as a physical fact, as real as any equation he ever solved. He actually spent the rest of his life trying to find the science to explain what he felt.
And the science is starting to catch up. There's this place called the HeartMath Institute, and they made a really groundbreaking discovery. Okay, so part one, your heart, it actually generates a measurable electromagnetic field that goes out several feet from your body. Wild, right? But here's part two, and this is where it gets really mind-blowing. When two people who are emotionally connected are physically near each other, their heart rhythms start to synchronize. They start to beat in sync. It's like their hearts are having a conversation that their conscious minds don't even know about. And this is measurable. This is real science. They call it group coherence.
Okay, so if we can measurably sync up and create a coherent group field, what happens when the exact opposite happens, but on a huge, massive scale? And this is the core idea we're exploring here.
What if we've been looking at this whole thing completely backwards? What if loneliness doesn't start inside you or me and then add up to become a social problem? What if it starts out there as a collective thing, a disturbance in a shared emotional field that we're all swimming in, and then we each experience that disturbance on the inside as our own personal loneliness?
And we already know this kind of thing happens on a smaller scale. There's a documented phenomenon called emotional contagion. You felt it for sure. You walk into a room where someone is really sad or really anxious, and even if they don't say a word, you start to feel it too. That's because your body is making all these tiny, unconscious adjustments, your posture, your facial muscles, your breathing, and that actually activates a similar feeling in you. It's not you choosing to feel it. Your nervous system just does it. Now let's bring this down to the level of the brain. A neuroscientist named John Cacioppo made a huge discovery. The chronically lonely brain doesn't just feel different, it literally sees the world differently. It flips into a state of what he called social hypervigilance. It starts seeing threats everywhere. A neutral look from a stranger becomes hostile. It starts to expect rejection around every corner. It basically sees disconnection even when connection is being offered. So you can see how this becomes a terrible self-fulfilling prophecy, right? The brain's attempt to protect you ends up creating the very isolation it's afraid of. Okay, so now let's scale that up. What happens when it's not just one brain in that state, but millions or even hundreds of millions of brains all at the same time? What does that do to that shared emotional field we were talking about? Does the field itself just get saturated with this expectation of disconnection? Does that become the new default setting for everyone? And does that make real connection harder for all of us, no matter what we do as individuals? Now, I know this all might sound kind of bleak, but thinking about the problem this way, it actually gives us a new, and I think a way more powerful way to start fixing it. It means the solution isn't just, go join a club or get out more. It's about changing the quality of the signal that we are each sending out into that field. You see, the antidote isn't necessarily more interaction, it's higher quality presence. Think about it. One single hour of being completely 100% present with another person, that has a much more powerful effect on your biology and on that shared field than 10 hours of just superficial, distracted, half-there connection. That group coherence we talked about, the heart syncing up, that doesn't come from just doing stuff with people. It comes from being with them, truly being with them.
Look, we can't just rewind the clock to a world of town squares and big front porches. It's gone. But what we can do is understand what those places gave us, that effortless shared presence. So yeah, maybe the loneliness you feel, maybe it's a signal you're picking up from this disturbed collective field. You can't control that. But the presence you offer, that is 100% yours. That is your choice. And when you choose to offer your full, undivided presence to someone, even just for a few minutes, you're not just connecting with one person. You are literally adding a little bit of coherence back into the field. You're helping to heal the whole thing. So that leaves us with one final question. The loneliness may not be yours, but your presence is. What do you choose to offer the field?